Okay, we'll slowly get started. Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us for our Savannah Jewish Family Services Food for Thought program. Please note, if you have any questions during the program, please write them in the chat. We'll have a short Q&A at the end. Before we begin, I have a special announcement. We are going back in person next week at 12:30 at the JEA for our Food for Thought programs. I hope to see many of you there. As of now, our speaker is Dr. Jay Goldstein, and we'll be having a delicious chicken lunch. So for today's program, I'm honored to introduce Jeremy Katz, the Director of Archives at the Breman Museum. Jeremy joined the staff at the Breman Museum in 2013. Since then, he has worked to grow, preserve, and increase access to the Edea Paroli and Joseph Cuba archives for Southern Jewish history at the Breman Museum. He's been recognized for his work by receiving the Atlanta Jewish Times 40 Under 40 Award and the Marilyn Subin Professional Development Award. He's the author of the Jewish Community of Atlanta book, and we're so thankful that he's here with us today. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sunny, for having me and for featuring and thinking about the Breman Museum and our archives. I don't know if you are familiar, but we are actually the home of the Savannah Jewish Archives. It's part of the Ida Pearl and Joseph Cuba Archives for Southern Jewish history here. And we have been the home of that archival collection, which is 200 linear feet of records from Savannah and Chatham County since 2015. We've been the shepherd of that, and it expands all the way back to the Minus family. We have the Minus family papers in that collection. So really, really cool collection. And we'll be talking about how to act. We have all these amazing resources, not only from Savannah, but from the rest of the state of Georgia and also Alabama. So how do we make these collections accessible to the public? And we've done a lot, especially over the last year and a half during the pandemic. We've taken advantage of that extra time at home and turned lemons into lemonade. And we are the forefront of the archives industry when it comes to making collections, historic collections, available to the public. So I'm going to show you all about that. But first, I'm going to start with the kind of a very kind of 30,000 foot view of the museum. If you're not familiar with the museum, I'm going to give you kind of a background of that, and then go into the archives and kind of do a deep dive into the archives, our projects going on, and how to access our collections. These are things that you can do at home. Well, let's start with what we're up against. So this is particularly Atlanta, but it's true throughout the Southeast. We're getting these are the demographics, 21st century demographics of Atlanta and kind of towns throughout the South in general. We're getting it's a very transient region. This rise of the Sun Belt. We're getting the decline of the Rust Belt, leading to this influx of people coming from the rest of the country to the Southeast. And so with Atlanta, you have over 80% of the people that are and Jewish people in Atlanta are not born in Atlanta. And further, the vast majority of them, 60% of them are not connected with any Jewish organization. So you have this community that isn't from here, and they're not connected to the Jewish community. So one of our challenges that the Breman Museum is undertaking is, how do we connect these folks to the Jewish community? And part of that is talking about Jewish history and making them feel connected to this community. Another challenge that we have, and these demographics were reinforced in 2013 by a Pew Research Center study that found that from the greatest generation to the millennial generation, we're seeing an increase of Jews of no religion. We're seeing an increase of intermarriage, and also those Jews of no religion raising their children as Jews of no religion. So another challenge that the Jewish community has is, how do we connect again these Jews of no religion, or intermarried couples, families, these interfaith families with the Jewish community? And on top of that, we have a rise of anti-Semitism, especially since 2015, 2016 till the present day. We're starting to see a large outpouring of anti-Semitism. A lot of that has to do with the very uncertain times that we're in, especially with the pandemic, as certainly added to that stress level and those uncertainties, and that's when we see a rise in hatred and anti-Semitism. So, how do we combat anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial? How do we connect interfaith families and members of the Jewish community who are not affiliated with any Jewish organizations? Well, at the Breman Museum, we think that is through Holocaust education, our archives, creating programs related to Jewish history to instill that sense of Jewish pride in your Jewish community, and through our exhibition. So if you're not familiar with the Breman Museum, we are Georgia's Jewish museum, and we accomplish our mission, which is connect people to Jewish history, culture, and arts through our physical space, which consists of 3 exhibition galleries, an auditorium, and a repository of archival material that is the largest in the region. And we also do it through an increasingly growing virtual space that includes virtual exhibitions and virtual programs, as well as making our archives, the content in our archives available online. So if you haven't been to the Breman Museum, I'm going to show you all some sorts of cool stuff we're doing. So I hope that you all will be encouraged to come to Atlanta and come to the Breman Museum. It's a really exciting time to visit, especially next month. We're having 2 new exhibitions go up right now, which I'll be talking about in a moment. And we would not be able to do what we do if it wasn't for our partners. And we, especially this last year and a half, have expanded our partnerships. We've actually done a lot with Savannah too, with the JEA and the Federation there. Did a number of virtual programs with you all, especially at the start of the pandemic. And we partner with, we say we're only as strong as our partners. We want to expand our audience. We want to pollinate with these other institutions and share our resources and share our audiences. So we wouldn't be able to do all that we do if it wasn't for our funders and if it wasn't for our partners. Now, this last year has obviously been incredibly challenging. With the pandemic, our doors are closed to the public. So that's a massive part of our revenue. It's a massive part of our the way that the public views us. But I'm happy to say that we actually had more attendance last year than we had in 2019, because we quickly pivoted to a virtual experience and a virtual audience, with virtual programs, with virtual exhibitions. We had virtual programs that were reaching 400 or 500. Largest, I think, was like over 900 people on one of our virtual programs, which we can't even fit in the building. We can only fit a capacity. Our auditorium is 300. So we were, tripling that online. So pretty significant way for us to reach new audiences, and also reaching audiences that are that can't travel to the museum because of whatever it's distance or disability or income. And so we are getting into people's homes and meeting them where they are in a really significant way. And this is something we're going to continue as we go forward, even as the pandemic hopefully comes to a close, although it's been a little iffy recently. We're looking at doing hybrid, doing in-person as well as virtual. So making those offerings available to that wide audience that we've accrued over this last year. One of the really cool things that we're doing with Holocaust education is we made our Holocaust gallery virtual. So instead of, a big part of us, can you all see this? I hope that y'all can see this. One of the really cool things that we did is we now, instead of having the students come to our museum on field trips, we can actually take them into our gallery virtually. So they are doing docent-led tours online, and it's just kind of like Google Street View. You can go through the gallery, you can click on these dots and talk about these different topics and pictures as the docent leads these school groups, which some of these school groups can't even travel to the museum because they're in North Carolina, South Carolina. And we can even add more additional information into the gallery now that we don't even have in the actual gallery. For example, we added this video that's not even in our gallery to add context to the history of this particular piece in the exhibition. So using our archives, using other resources to add more materials to our collection or to our exhibition that we don't actually have physically on the walls. So again, taking advantage of the pandemic and using that time to grow our audiences. And we did the same thing with a virtual exhibition recently that we just had on actually physically in our gallery space. This was an exhibition that we had about a jazz photographer, Herb Schnitzer. And just like the one for the Holocaust Gallery, um, people could walk through this virtually. This here, for example, here's a great picture of Miles Davis. And this is a Star of David that he wore on a necklace that he wore that was given to him by one of his family friends. And so it's really, really amazing how we were making our space. I want to show you one cool picture over here, which is one of my favorites. It's Thelonious Monk. Even though our doors were closed, we were still making this content. This is a really cool picture. Making our content accessible online and providing that educational resource, even though our doors were closed to the public. Now, I've talked about Holocaust education in our exhibitions, but what about the archives? That's what we're here to talk about. This is what I oversee as the director of the archives, and an honor and a privilege to work with the largest repository for Jewish history in the Southeast that spans over 1,000 manuscript collections that measure millions of documents, tens of thousands of photographs, over 1,000 artifacts, textiles, and over 1,000 oral histories as well. And this last year, despite all of the challenges of the pandemic, we are thriving in the archives. We collected materials related to the pandemic to rapidly respond and collect that history of the Jewish community's response to the pandemic. We collected materials even from John Ossoff's historic campaign to become the first Jewish senator from the state of Georgia. And we held a number of virtual programs that reached thousands of attendees. And we're working on a major exhibition that is all about the archives that's opening up next month. But we have very humble beginnings. The archives are the oldest component of the Breman Museum. We were founded in the mid-'80s as the Jewish Community Archives in the old Atlanta Jewish Federation building on Peachtree Street. And here's my predecessor, Sandy Breman. She was the founding archivist of the archives at the museum, at the Federation, I should say. And then in 1996, when the Breman Museum opened, the archives were transferred under the auspices of the museum. They were endowed by the Cuba family. That's why we're called the Ida Pearl and Joseph Cuba Archives for Southern Jewish History. And this little archive has grown into this amazing repository that's the largest in the region. So I am standing on the shoulders of giants. And we are the central repository for Jewish history in Georgia. We have collected throughout the entire state. And you'll see here, Savannah. And like I said, in 2015, absorbed the Savannah Jewish Archives, which really cemented us as the main repository for Jewish history in Georgia. Up until that point, we had collected throughout the entire state, but we respected the collecting territory of the Savannah Jewish Archives. But when they were looking for a new home, we made a passionate plea for those archives to come to the Breman, and we were very, very fortunate that the Savannah Jewish Archives Board decided to transfer them to us, and we are making the most of that collection. And I'll show you in a second how we're doing that in lots of different ways. So how do we have all these amazing resources, right? We have this incredible history of this community. We have all these documents, photographs, artifacts, oral histories. How do we make them accessible to the public? Well, one of the ways is through print, through publishing. We just published 2 books this last year, one on the Jewish community of Atlanta and one on the Temple, which is the oldest Jewish congregation in Atlanta, and also through public programming. We had over 24 programs last year, reaching over 3,000 attendees. We also created a Google Arts and Culture page, which just launched last year, and actually just recently launched alongside this Atlanta project rollout. So this is Atlanta's Google Arts and Culture page, the project page. And here you see us alongside 30 other cultural arts institutions in Atlanta. So here alongside Emory, the U.S. National Archives, the High Museum of Art, And here is the Breman Museum. So when people click on the Breman Museum's Google Arts and Culture page, you can learn more about the Breman Museum, who we are, link to your social media pages. We have 3 online exhibitions, and we have many more actually ready to go up. They're just in final review right now. So you can learn about a story of Jewish Atlanta, the temple bombing, or a woman air service pilot during World War II. And when you click in these exhibitions, they're very intuitive, colorful, easy to navigate and use as you learn about different topics. And we were looking into doing many on Savannah and Savannah's Jewish history. And these exhibitions are made up of these items. So we have over 300 items, and you can arrange them either by popularity or you can do them in a timeline. So let me show you how high resolution this is. I'll click on one of the objects that we have in here. Let's see. Let's click on this is a piece of rubble from the temple bombing. And this is very high resolution. You can click in and see every single little grain of cement in this column, in this capital, but that was a piece of the rubble during the temple bombing. And what's really neat is when you add items to Google Arts and Culture, they go into a bucket of over 5 million items from over 2,000 cultural arts institutions that are on this platform. And so if any other institution were to use one of our items from our collection, it would automatically cite us as the source. So really cool thing going on there. And that's a really awesome partnership with Google. Another thing that we did during the pandemic, we overhauled our entire collection catalog system from outdated siloed catalog database systems to integrated state-of-the-art industry-leading catalog systems that are making exponentially increasing access to our collections and our holdings. So how do you access our new catalog systems? Well, go to the breman.org. If you hover over research, click on Southern Jewish Archives. It's going to take you to this landing page here. And here you're going to see our 3 different catalog systems. So let's start with oral histories, for example. So let's click in here and let's search for Savannah, for example. This is going to show you wherever that word shows up in the source, the description, the subject, the index, the transcript, or the annotations. Now, what does that mean? Let's click on Kay Cole. She was actually a founder of the Savannah Jewish Archives. Probably a lot of you probably know her. So what's really cool about this new oral history catalog system is it has the media. This is an MP3. It was an audio file that we've uploaded alongside descriptive information about Kay Cole, a biography, a scope of the interview. There's also a timestamped index. So whenever the subject of the conversation changes from education to meeting her husband, her involvement in the Jewish organizations or the civil rights era, the Savannah Jewish Archives, for example, users can click on that and jump right to that point in the interview.
Bloom when you began.
And also those little points here under it, you can click on these as well to jump. These are the index points that you can jump to. There's also a timestamp transcript too. So every 30 seconds, so you see, I searched for the word Savannah. So everywhere that word Savannah is mentioned is highlighted. So if you wanted to hear her talk about how she's a native Savannian or whatever, you could click on the nearest timestamp and jump right to that point. Also, it's annotated too. So she talks about the Oglethorpe Sanitarium. What the hell is that? Well, we can go in and add that context to that term. And so the idea here is to lower the barrier as much as possible, make our collections as highly accessible so that if someone comes across this term that they don't know, and we have a lot of those. I mean, we're talking about Jewish terminology here. We're talking about local terminology that not everybody in the world is going to know. So we can go in and add that particular context. So Hadassah, for example, B'nai B'rith, for example, those are all terms that we can go in and annotate. And so whenever that term comes up, these terms come up, we can annotate. People can search across it, find that exact word that they're looking for, and jump to the nearest 30-second timestamp. So this is a really, really powerful way of making the stories of our community told by those who lived it accessible to the public. Now, this system is really, really powerful on its own. It's groundbreaking, it's revolutionary. But we are one of 2 archives in the country that have integrated this oral history catalog system with ArchiveSpace. ArchiveSpace is the leading collection catalog system in the archives field for documenting and describing manuscript collections. So it's us and Yale University that had this integration. Johns Hopkins is about to become the third. So you see here Kay Cole alongside the over 300 oral histories that we've cataloged in this fashion. And there's quite a lot of Savannahans in here, actually. We have many more to do. I'm not going to say that we're done by any means. We've done only about a third of the collection. So there's lots of oral histories left to do. And archive space is really cool on its own. It's really meant for manuscript document collections. So in here we have over 400 collections, over 28,000 records, over 1,000 digital objects, and hundreds of subjects and agents. So I'll go in here and type Savannah, for example. I'm just using Savannah as an example in all of these instances. You can use names, surnames, forenames, locations, dates, events, whatever. You can search whatever your heart desires in these search portals. So I'd search Savannah in our finding aids in our manuscript collection catalog. And so here you see the Savannah Jewish Federation records, the Rambam Day School, Kay and Don Cole papers. Let's click on that just because we're staying on brand here. So with Don and Kay Cole papers, you can see the scope of the contents of the contents of this collection, the biographical historical note of them. And then here you see a full inventory of the documents, the files that are in this collection. So whether a researcher is interested in these files, they can easily contact and ask the archives a question and request these files be sent to them. And some of these collections we've even digitized. I'll show you one, for example. We just digitized this Holocaust survivors family papers. So this is an example of a collection that we've digitized, and this is something we want to do much more of. It's just a matter of resources. So for example, someone may be interested in this Iron Cross certificate of Leo Cohn. They can click on a PDF and it takes them right to that document. So really, really significant ways of making our collections, our oral histories and our document collections accessible in industry-leading ways. One other really cool thing I want to show you all. Let me get back to go back to the archives landing page. So we explored the oral histories and the finding aids. Those two are linked and integrated, but I also want to show you our catalog system. So this has all of our photographs and our artifacts and textiles in here. So let me search in here for Savannah too, just so we're staying on the same tone here. So I typed in Savannah and you see all of these items, artifacts, photographs that are related to that particular term. And again, you can search anything in here and you come find whatever is related to that term. So in this collection, we have Savannah Jewish Archives had thousands of images, thousands of document collections, and artifacts, oral histories, 150 oral histories that we are working to make as accessible as possible in industry-leading ways. So I'll click on it. There's a photograph, for example, when you have all these different terms that are hyperlinked, so you can see who's in the picture, and then you can hyperlink, oh, I'm interested in Savannah Jewish Federation. This is going to link to all the photographs and items that have that particular subject term attached to it. So everything is trying to make it as usable, searchable as possible. So that's a really cool thing. Oh, this is also really cool. So we're part of the first ever statewide harvest of by the Digital Library of Georgia. So you can see here us alongside Atlanta History Center, Auburn Avenue Research Center, University of West Georgia. And so we are looking, this is a beta, but the great thing about these new catalog systems is that we can easily share it with our partners, with our colleagues at the statewide level and national and national levels as well. Another really cool thing that we're doing is our Moments in Time project, which is another oral history collection. And what's really special about this is that it is meant to be, it's intended for a younger generation, a younger audience, where the oral history clips are 2 to 5 minutes. And so one of the neat things that we did recently is we, just like with our other oral histories, we added transcripts, but we added a caption file. So you see a timestamp every few seconds for this video, and you can play it and also have the captions alongside the bottom too. So that we have over 250 moments in time from pillars of the community talking about different topics. So you see here talking about healing and kindness, about culture, family, leadership, mentors, culture, connection, community. Bernie Marcus, for example, is a co-founder of Home Depot. Talking about, he also helped start JScreen, which you may be familiar about. Him talking about his take on Judaism or Israel or giving. So this is another really cool oral history project that we're working on. And then this is a really cool piece. This is something that we partnered with dozens of Jewish archives from around the country to collect items related to the pandemic and the Jewish response to the pandemic. So this is an item that we received soon after the pandemic began. It's a face mask that was created out of a kippah. Her husband, the lady who created this, her husband had a kippah collection. And so she turned this kippah into a face mask and donated it to the Breman Museum, which we then added it to this American Jewish Life portal. It's a collective made up of, I can show you, it's a part of Collecting These Times. And Collecting These Times is an amalgamation of lots of different projects from many different Jewish organizations and archives and museums from around the country. So see us here alongside the Roy Rosenzweig Center at George Mason, the Council of American Jewish Museums, the Smithsonian Institution, the American Jewish Archives. Here you see the Breman Museum. This is our rapid response collecting project. And so partnering with our colleagues at different Jewish organizations around the country to, typically archives are a reactive response to something. It's not necessarily proactive. It takes a little while for history to take hold and know what's historic, right? So this, knowing that the pandemic was historic, we took action alongside our colleagues in the field to work together to create this online collective. And this is something that's crowdsourced. So you could actually contribute your own item to this if you wanted to. You can find whichever project you want to contribute to and contribute to it online. It's crowdsourced. So if you have a pandemic story that you want to share, this is something you can go on and do yourself. Just Google Collecting These Times and you'll find the list of projects and you can find which project is right for you. Now, the last thing I want to mention is that we are in the process of creating the biggest in-house exhibition since our opening 25 years ago. And it's honor of our 25th anniversary. It's opening up next month. So I hope that, actually at the end of this month, technically, but open to in early September to the general public. And this is gonna be a celebration of the museum and a celebration of Jewish life in the South. It's geared all around our archives and our collections. And a good chunk of the materials in this collection, in this exhibition, are coming from the Savannah Jewish Archives. For example, we have items from the Minus family papers, from the Solomons family. You may remember the Solomons druggists, as well as the Sheftel family and others. So I hope that you all can come to the Breman Museum for our next big in-house exhibition that is actually in the process of being fabricated and installed at this very moment. So I hope that you all have enjoyed learning about the archives in the Breman Museum and how we are making our collections accessible to the public in industry-leading ways. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
I see Sharon had a question. Go ahead, Sharon. You can unmute yourself.
Oh, you're still muted, Sharon.
You have something that is original that you feel like the archives would be interested in. We used to just take it to the JEA or, to be given to them. How do we get it to you? If there are old original family pictures that they were born in Savannah or grew up in Savannah, how do you give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we still do partner with the JEA and the Federation there. So if you give them your materials, they'll find a way. We've coordinated with some of our volunteers, have houses in Tybee or in Savannah. And so they'll be nice enough to transport them back to Atlanta for us, and we'll add them to the archives. I will say to contact us first, though, to make sure that they are items that we want. We have to be very selective because of the space that we have. So we can only accept photographs that are identified, because we don't know who's in them. If we can't identify them, we need you all to do that. And also just in terms of the objects, if you have three-dimensional objects, we need to make sure that we have the space to care for them. So just contact us at in the archives at the Breman. Let us know what you have, and we will find a way, whether it's through the JEA, through the Federation, or if we have any family or friends, volunteers that are going to Savannah, we can arrange for that transportation back to the Breman.
My sister-in-law is Carla Silver.
Oh my gosh, yes, yeah. So I actually, when I said volunteer, that's what I was thinking of, because
Right.
she's done that for us before. She's very nice.
So I'll get in touch with you and send some things with her.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sharon. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Sharon. I also see we have another question from Larry.
Could you share with us some of the findings, some of the things that you found a little unusual in what you consider to be the Jewish response to COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, this last year has been a challenge for everyone, but I'm extremely proud of the way that the Jewish community has stepped up to support our own. And that's something that I think the Jewish community has done really well through lots of challenging times in history, and provided that social safety net for our own. Some of the things that stick out to me personally, well, those face masks I think are just amazing. I mean, the fact that they were so ingenious way of turning a ritual object into a way of protecting yourself against a airborne pathogen. Some of the other things that we've collected that are really unique, lots of poems, of stories that folks have written down about the ways that they celebrated holidays, for example, during COVID, their internal thoughts. So basically like diaries, keeping diaries about their experience. In Atlanta, actually, we had a feature film that was created all about Atlanta and its Jewish response to the pandemic. It was premiered during the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival this year. It's called Atlanta, the city, Atlanta, the Atlanta, the city too busy to wait. It's a play on Atlanta, the city too busy to hate. And it's all about how the Jewish community in Atlanta stepped up in terms of supporting its own. The Federation took a lead on providing the COVID relief funds to different organizations and even to individuals directly, to synagogues. Especially in the Orthodox community, they couldn't just get on Zoom on Shabbat. That's not something they can do because of the halakha. And so doing very creative things to still stay connected to their communities. One of the things that was really unique was that on Friday before Shabbat, they were driving around and having like socially distanced dance parties and Shabbat kind of onegs in predominantly Orthodox Jewish community neighborhoods in Atlanta. So just things like that. If you're interested in that movie, I highly recommend it because it really captures the zeitgeist of how the Jewish community, at least in Atlanta, responded to COVID. And it has a lot of kind of anecdotal stories about that.
Could you give us a link for that movie, or is there a way that we'd be able to get it?
Yeah. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can dig that up. I have a link here somewhere. Let me see if it's still live. Okay, hold on.
Maybe you could just send it to Sunny and she can send it out to.
Yeah,
I was going to say that. Yep.
I will. I'll see if I can find it still. The filmmaker sent it to me, so I don't know if it's still live because I know he's been It may need to be like something that I may need to contact the filmmaker to see if he wants to make that available. He may even be able to do a screening for you all too, actually.
Wow.
So what I could do is actually what I'll do is I'll connect you with the filmmaker because maybe it's something that y'all would want to. Actually, here I just found the link here. I'm gonna send this out. So if you want to watch that video,
was there, would you say, uniformity to Jewish response across the different variations of Judaism in Atlanta?
There's certainly
Orthodox, were they?
Yeah, besides just the Orthodox, I mean, every synagogue pivoted. I mean, even we pivoted. I mean, even Jewish organizations pivoted in significant ways to still fulfill our missions and stay connected and stay relevant. I mean, I think it was kind of a sink or swim moment where, you needed to find a way through hell or high water to reach your audiences. And that was a challenge just for the Breman Museum because we get thousands of people through our doors every year and our doors were closed. And so we pivoted virtually pretty early on. Actually, that was one of the first things we did was we had a genealogy meeting that we went virtual. And we had actually more people that we would have probably had in person. So we knew that there was something there. And also other Jewish organizations, of course, the synagogues that were comfortable streaming services did a lot of that. Repair the World, we have an office for Repair the World in Atlanta, and they were doing a lot during the pandemic, delivering food to those that were at risk and couldn't go to the grocery store, and so many others. They had like over 100 volunteer opportunities for people to sign up and help out during the pandemic. So it was definitely a team effort, and I'm incredibly proud of the way the Jewish community responded to COVID.
Thank you, Jeremy. Do we have any other questions for Jeremy? Well, if there are none, I just wanted to thank you so much, Jeremy, for today's program. If you can in the chat, to just send the link to the website.
Yeah,
that would
definitely
be great.
Me too.
And before we leave, I wanted to say just a reminder, next Thursday, we'll be going back in person with Dr. Jay Goldstein at 12:30 at the JA with a delicious lunch. Please make sure you RSVP. Okay, great. I see, Jeremy, you sent a link. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
Sonny, are you?
Stay safe.
Bye.
Sonny, just a quick question.
Yes, here,
Sonny,
Larry, I
quick
can
question.
stay with you.